Napoleon is master of Europe. 6 months after the defeat at Trafalgar, the defeated Admiral Villeneuve is returned to France.
I am Admiral Villeneuve, taken prisoner at the Battle of Trafalgar. Six months of captivity in England, but today I am free. Free to return to France, aboard this parliamentary ship. Free to justify myself at last to the Emperor. I had only one flaw, he said. Was it necessary to disobey his orders? Would France still rule the English Channel? The English Channel was at stake. Without 6 hours of control, England would cease to exist. But 6 hours in the Channel is an eternity. Will the Emperor even grant me an audience? I know that the press has been ordered not to report on Trafalgar. But I will not be silenced. I can defend myself. I will put an end to the infamous remarks that sully my honor, my family, my wife. You must listen to me. You will listen to me. Trafalgar, a long story that began in Egypt in 1798 at Aboukir, when I first met Admiral Nelson.
Pursued us across the Mediterranean and finally caught us in the roadstead of Aboukir on the Egyptian coast.
I command the rear guard of our squadron. The vanguard and center of our fleet came under heavy attack, led by British Admiral Nelson. The battle is merciless. The men are at their posts. The ardor of our squadron stands up to English aggression. My crew is boiling with impatience. They are ready to do battle with the English, but I've received no orders. I cannot intervene. The English have us surrounded. We had no idea. They're not fighting in line, as is customary in Europe. Yet, over there, I can see their flagship, commanded by Nelson, a leader bold enough to risk a night attack. His hatred of us drives him on. He'll do anything. He has only one idea, to destroy us, destroy Bonaparte. But Bonaparte is not here. He landed on Egyptian soil several days ago with the rest of his army.
By the time of Aboukir, Nelson had developed a fierce hatred of France. France had been at war with England for hundreds of years. It was the enemy, and the French Revolution was considered particularly deplorable. Nelson was the son of a clergyman. He hated the anti-clericalism and violence of the revolution. Nelson thought Napoleon was an adventurer, that he was disturbing the peace in Europe and that he should be stopped. He was described as a plague. for mankind.
Nelson is the prototype, I would say, of the British naval officer. Entered the Corps at the age of 12, having done all his training at sea. But Nelson is not, of course, the son of a little clergyman, but he was still the great-nephew of Premier Walpole. What's more, his uncle was an admiral and one of the most powerful men in the Royal Navy.
The battle has been raging for 4 hours. Our men are dying under the English guns. No one can count the losses. Our squadron is decimated. I still have no orders. Our impotence has the color of shame, but we're facing the wind, all linked together to better maintain our classic battle line. The Orient, our flagship, has just been pulverized. Half our naval forces are already lost. What am I to do? Save those who can be saved or counterattack? I can't sacrifice my men needlessly. My decision is made. I withdraw from the battlefield with the rearguard. Little did I know that night that my path would soon cross again with that of Admiral Nelson.
We lost 80% of the French corps de bataille at Aboukir, 80% of the corps de bataille. This is the real great battle of destruction, the first great battle of destruction in history.
England finally triumphed in the Egyptian expedition, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. England was exhausted. The war was costly for the pound sterling that subsidized coalitions on the continent. And so we ended up with the Peace of Amiens in 1801, which put an end to the war that had begun, I remind you, in April 1792. For the first time since April 1792, France was at peace with Europe. And Bonaparte's prestige was enormously enhanced, which was one of the reasons he was elected consul for life and then emperor.
And the problem is that leaders on both sides only make peace under duress, but neither side gave in. The Peace of Amiens didn't solve any problems. So from the moment the two countries went to war, they also found themselves facing the same strategic impasse that existed before the Peace of Amiens. And so Napoleon, who had no fleet of his own, found himself obliged to return to his old project of invading England, hence the Boulogne camp.
Most of my fellow citizens have little faith in a lasting peace with England. Our two nations are traditional enemies. The vanguard of Napoleon's army is already in Boulogne, a port chosen by Napoleon because of its proximity to England, and also in reference to Caesar, whose invasion of England from the same port had been crowned with success. Boulogne-sur-Mer, a small seaside town of just 50 souls, transformed into a port city of 40, the ideal bridgehead for the invasion of England. The landscape changed, and the construction of a large port, the Bassin Napoleonien, was built to accommodate the thousands of boats destined for the landings. Bonaparte revealed his thoughts to the British ambassador.
You have a navy that I could never match, but I have 500 men ready to march. A descent and a stay of 2 months in England would be for France a peace of 100 years.
every French port from Dunkirk to Cherbourg. Forces and resources are deployed, converging on Boulogne-sur-Mer. Every shipyard in France is busy building gunboats, flat-bottomed barks and barges. Donations poured in from all sides. Major cities even donated ships. Soldiers, in turn, donated part of their pay to the war effort. Mobilization was widespread. Day and night, 7 days a week, intense activity reigns. The pounding of tools set the pace in Boulogne. Soon the secret was on everyone's lips. A huge flotilla of 2 Zero boats, used to transport armed troops, would make the invasion possible. The project aroused a veritable popular infatuation. The hope of defeating England, of finally taking. Our revenge gave everyone their hearts and their work. The sea became the center of attention.
Some historians maintain that the threat of a landing was a huge bluff that would have enabled Napoleon to concentrate and train a huge army at the Boulogne camp, without arousing the suspicions of Austria and Russia, his real adversaries. An examination of the naval budget shows that before the Trafalgar campaign, appropriations for the fleet had suddenly doubled. Expenditure on the Boulogne flotilla alone approached the enormous sum of 60 million, the price of 50 ships.
It's a very expensive bluff, and you've assembled the best French army at the Boulogne camp. Our history will never see an army comparable to that of the Boulogne camp, because it's an army that's trained every day, and it's an army we're going to. In Germany at Austerlitz, and I insist it's a national army.
Considerable earthworks were required. We rebuilt the roads, we rebuilt the infrastructure. We've built ports, we've built dikes, we've built buildings. It's a considerable effort. And what you have to understand is that it still hasn't been done, but it provoked extraordinary enthusiasm among the participants. Because they were all young, they all believed in it, and all the young engineers, artillerymen, etc. gave their all to the project.
Thousands of soldiers train every day. In living memory, the Boulogne army is the most spectacular ever seen. The figures announced turn our heads. There was talk of 150,000 men and 10,000 horses, 72,000 infantrymen, 16,000 horsemen, 9,000 artillerymen, and over 400 heavy artillery pieces. 21,000 sailors are assigned to the flotilla. The ambitious design was about to become reality.
The British didn't think Napoleon was bluffing. They were worried. That's why there was a huge surge of volunteers, just as there had been in France in 1792-93, when hundreds of thousands of volunteers turned out to fight the invasion. The same thing happened in England in 1803, 1804. The construction of the Boulogne camp caused a great deal of concern in England. They knew they were facing the best army in Europe across the Channel.
On August 16, 1804, a Legion of Honor award ceremony marked the apogee of the Boulogne camp. This grandiose ceremony, organized with pomp and solemnity, marked the alliance between the army and its leader. The Emperor, seated on King Dagobert's throne with his back to England, distributed 2,000 crosses. Distinguishing men of valor in a resolutely new world. A token of pride in being French and in serving the Emperor. 100,000 soldiers face him. 100,000 men united and proud, but belonging to the largest army in Europe. Barely 2 years, and the construction of the Boulogne camp and the Napoleonic basin is complete. The great army was formed, and the huge landing flotilla ready to cross the waters. All that remained was to draw the Royal Navy away from the English Channel. Far from the Channel, it was in my native Valençon, in Provence, that I learned to command boats. I was called to command the Toulon fleet, succeeding Admiral Latouche-Treville, who died prematurely. As an intrepid commander and a man of renown, I can't help but appreciate the honor bestowed upon me. I hope to prove myself worthy of this legacy. I know that his crew, won over by his colorful temperament, would follow him to the ends of the earth if they asked. I'm delighted and proud to discover my flagship, the Bucentaur. A superb two-decker, gleaming and majestic, with 80 cannons and a seasoned crew. A rarity in these times. From the sight of the Bucentaur, I'm sure we'll soon be able to rival the Royal Navy.
It was at the beginning of March 1805 that Napoleon perfected the maneuver that would lead to the invasion of England. This plan has often been described as brilliant. It took into account Spain's entry into the war on our side. The Emperor thus had some 30 additional ships at his disposal. His masterful idea was to concentrate all available Franco-Spanish ocean-going forces in the West Indies, out of sight of the enemy, and then have them converge on the English Channel.
The West Indies were by far the most obvious place to strike. It was the British Empire's main economic resource. It was the source of most of the money. Money the British used to fight. If Napoleon hit them there, he would have hit the British economy
itself, as well as England's position as the Bank of Europe. It was the Empire's most vulnerable point from the sea.
It was the area the English most feared the French would attack.
The English, surprised by these movements, were bound to disperse their forces and would be unable to oppose the triumphant advance of the immense naval army to Boulogne. To achieve this objective, the Rochefort squadron, commanded by Messines, already present in the West Indies, was asked. Admiral Ganteaume's powerful squadron in Brest to set sail without fighting and to go and unblock the French and Spanish squadrons. The French and Spanish squadrons there before reaching Fort-de-France. The Toulon squadron commanded by Villeneuve to leave the Mediterranean, join up with Admiral Gravina's Spanish squadron at Cádiz and also head for Fort-de-France.
My orders are explicit. I'm to break the Toulon blockade without fighting, join up with the Spanish squadron at Cádiz, and set course for the West Indies. The Emperor has surrounded his final intentions with the utmost secrecy. Only his generals on land enjoyed his confidence. He did not have the same regard for men at sea. The naval tool often frustrates him, and he only sends his admirals fragmentary, compartmentalized information. So I find myself in the dark about the overall plan. But I'm an officer. I'm here to do my duty, to keep my reservations to myself, to ignore what I don't know, if His Majesty so requires. My main duty is to serve her and carry out her orders. I am unaware that my destiny, the destiny of the French Navy, the destiny of England is at stake. I am unaware that the purpose of our voyage to the West Indies is to force the English to clear the English Channel in pursuit of us. Their large number of ships allows them to establish a close blockade of all our major ports. Their squadrons are watching us. I take advantage of Admiral Nelson's. Nelson's ships in Sardinia to take to the open sea. I'm sure of it. He hasn't seen me. History repeats itself. As at Aboukir, I escaped from Nelson. Nelson learns that we have left Toulon. Several days after our departure. He then decided to come after us. English sailors are very used to the high seas, as well as to combat, and know how to obey an iron discipline. Their ships are the most powerful and best armed in the world. Their crews are made up exclusively of experienced men. But, misinformed and convinced that we had set course for Egypt, Nelson ordered his entire fleet to sail in the wrong direction. He lost track of us. 3 weeks pass before Nelson learns that we're on our way to the West Indies in the company of the Spanish fleet. With the Spanish fleet, we had successfully joined at Cádiz. I passed Gibraltar safely. I'm delighted. My squadron is safe. I know I'm ahead of my enemy, but I don't know it's a month. The wheel of fate has been set in our favor. Vexed at having been duped, Nelson continued the hunt. In so doing, he disobeyed the orders of the British Admiralty. He should be defending the English Channel. We have arrived at Fort-de-France, but we still have no idea of the final objective. Why did we combine the French and Spanish fleets? Are the West Indies our real destination? Why so many mysteries? Under these conditions, it's impossible to take the slightest initiative. As I await further instructions, I am aware that Nelson could arrive at any moment. He hates to lose. I must remain vigilant. If I have to, I won't fail. I've studied all his battles. I understand his tactics, and I know how he fights. Our stay in Martinique continues, and still no news from the Emperor. Aboard our ships, life goes on as usual. Nostalgia for home sometimes grips us. I like to recall the gentle springs and gardens of my peaceful Provence, where even the mosquitoes are more discreet and less voracious. The crews don't seem worried. And I'm watching. I'm hoping for the arrival of a frigate to give me new orders.
Villeneuve's campaign got off to a good start. He got out of Toulon without a hitch, unblocked the Spanish squadron at Cádiz, and reached Fort-de-France. Nelson, completely lost pressure time in the central Mediterranean and passed Gibraltar a month late. But the other parts of the brilliant plan went less smoothly. Mississin was alerted in time and returned to Europe. Cantôme, faced with a vigilant blockade, could not set sail without a fight. The initial plan had to be modified. From Italy, where he is staying, the Emperor devises other combinations. Villeneuve would have to, after ravaging the English West Indies, set course for the Ferrol, then Brest, to unblock the Allied forces in these two ports. Thanks to his reinforcements, he would be able to penetrate the English Channel and present himself in front of Boulogne. How did Napoleon give orders to his squadrons? Napoleon wasn't necessarily in Paris. He was in Milan and Lyon during the Trafalgar campaign. So he had to start by sending messages to Paris, which would take 10 days. Then, these orders have to reach a port. Rochefort, in this case, is the best placed. Then, they have to be embarked on a frigate or several frigates, because we are far from being masters of the seas, and we run a very high risk of having these communications intercepted. So we're going to send 2-3 boats to the squadron in the West Indies, which we'll have to find. We don't know exactly where it is, so there are extraordinary hazards and major communication difficulties, which are both unreliable and very slow.
So, our presence in Martinique is part of a diversion plan as vast as it is random. We had to set course for Boulogne-sur-Mer to prepare for the invasion of England. deprived of two presumed assets, the Ganteaume and Mississippi squadrons. The Emperor found it difficult to concentrate on a single objective. He spread himself thin and several hairs at once. Not content with preparing to invade of England, he also wants to attack English possessions in the West Indies. In Antigua, we board a British merchant convoy. While waiting for the report on the interrogation of the prisoners, I go to the infirmary to check on the sick. How are the men? There are more and more of them. Not at all, Admiral. We've got big problems on the boat. Cheer up, soldier. We'll take care of you.
Yeah, we will.
Admiral, a message just arrived for you. At last, my chief of staff hands me the interrogation report on the English prisoners. Nelson is at the Barbados. If Nelson is bobbed, it means he's not in the sleeve. For the first time in my life as an admiral, I'm ready to disobey. I seized the opportunity and hurried off towards Europe. My mission is to reach Boulogne and support the invasion flotilla. Nelson's pursuit from the Mediterranean has forced us to limit our refueling stops. I'm aware that sooner or later I'll have to ration the crews. Unfortunately, I know that our sailors will eventually fall ill from malnutrition. While behind us, the English, thanks to their unrivaled experience of long stays at sea, have no worries about supplies. The end of our return to Europe was a laborious one. Bad weather was either with us or with us. Periods of non-existent wind are replaced by storms. Our morale is affected. Yet it's not Nelson who crosses our path, but another Englishman, Admiral Robert Calder. I can barely make out my own squadron. It's an incredibly dense mashed potato, but that doesn't stop us.
On July 22, 1805, de Villeneuve's 20 ships, 14 French and 6 Spanish, met off Cape Finisterre. Admiral Calder's 15 vessels, which had come to meet them on the Ferrol round. Visibility was very poor. The adversaries lose sight of each other at times. The encounter goes down in history as the Combat des 1520, in allusion to the number of opponents, but also in reference to the Hospice des 1520 founded by Saint Louis for the blind. The Franco-Spaniards seemed to have the upper hand, but then their opponents lost sight of each other in the fog. The next morning, Villeneuve noticed that 2 Spaniard ships had disappeared.
And so, automatically, he was totally thrown off balance by the number of sick people, the poor condition of the equipment, etc. It's a sign of his insecurity, and so automatically he'll interpret the orders, which are very broad. Napoleon had foreseen different orders, so either he went up to Brest and took the Brest squadron to Boulogne, or he could go back up. He even considered passing through the north of England, or if events occur that are completely unforeseen, he was authorized to go to Cádiz. And it was this multiplicity of choices that finally unsettled Villeneuve and made him the easiest choice, which was to return to Cádiz.
In a state of disarray, I chose this option because I have the right to do so. I no longer believe in the success of my mission, but camouflage my feelings. The entire combined fleet is no longer in fighting condition. The vast diversionary operation stops at Cádiz. After months at sea, a glimpse of dry land brings general elation among the men. Cádiz would soon open its arms to them, and for the time being was already greeting them. At the same time, the Great Army turned its back on the Channel. The Emperor, despairing of seeing me arrive at Boulogne, changes his plans. He set his sights on Central Europe, where the Russian and Austrian armies are waiting with bated breath. In a few months, they'll be under the sun of Austerlitz. I've got a lot on my mind. How can I accomplish the mission entrusted to me when worries affect me from all sides? We can't be properly supplied. Food and ammunition are in short supply. Pay is not forthcoming. Our ships are badly damaged. The infirmary and hospitals are always full. Scurvy, dysentery, chest pains, infections. Hundreds of sailors are missing. Added to this is inactivity. Crews are tense. The port of Cádiz, so welcoming on our arrival, becomes the scene of ricks between French and Spanish women. Exhausted by the heavy proximity of 27 zero men forced to live together, quarrels that often degenerate in defiance of the alliance between our two countries. I'm becoming increasingly disturbed. The latest letter from the Minister of the Navy puzzles me. Orders and counter-orders follow one another. What does he really want from me?
His Majesty wants to extinguish the circumspection he reproaches his navy for. This defensive system that kills audacity and doubles that of the enemy. She wants this audacity in all her admirals, captains, officers, and sailors. And whatever the outcome, she promises her consideration and graces to those who know how to carry it to excess. She counts the loss of her ships as nothing if she loses them with glory. And if the enemy presents itself in this way before Cádiz, she recommends and orders you not to hesitate to attack.
Enter. Well?
Admiral Rossili is in Madrid. He's on his way to take command of the fleet.
When Napoleon learns that Villeneuve is a Cadix, that is to say, it's confirmed to him, he's furious. Furious. He no longer trusts him. He's insulted him, really. And he decides that he must be relieved of his command, that he is unworthy of it. He chose Admiral Rossili, who hadn't seen the sea for 15 years, who was director of the map and chart repository, so they called him Old Rossili.
But strangely enough, there's something quite astonishing here. Napoleon's insane gamble. Napoleon, because he pretended to confirm Villeneuve in his post, giving him a new mission to enter the Mediterranean. While saying to Ducret, you're going to send Admiral Rossili to Cádiz to replace Villeneuve, but you're not going to warn Admiral Villeneuve. In Napoleon's mind, Villeneuve is so pusillanimous that he won't appear, and Rossili can replace him in time. And through a flight of extraordinary circumstances, such as carriage damage in Madrid. An axle failure that delayed Rossili. Rossili arrived 3 days after Villeneuve's departure.
When Ducret doesn't want Villeneuve, and he did send him that famous letter, in which he urges him into action, I don't think Ducret has understood the breaking point Villeneuve has already reached. I think he's giving him a chance.
Prepare to sail as soon as possible.
Aye, Admiral.
Assemble all French and Spanish officers. Council of War tonight aboard the Boulogne-sur-Mer. The officers, and particularly the Spanish, have always strongly disagreed with the idea of a frontal attack with the English. Admiral Gravina advocates wintering in Cádiz. He points to the poor state of our fleet and doesn't want to hear of a sortie. I'm well aware that he's defending Spanish interests, which are somewhat different from ours. I have to convince them all. Let's put aside any cautiousness. The balance of power is in our favor for once. The weather's good, but the days ahead are likely to be less so. At last, we're all in agreement, carried along by the same momentum. We have no shortage of boldness and courage. We will use them with honor and grandeur in the service of our Emperor. Our will is impregnable. Our crew's dearest wish is to put all problems behind us and set sail again. We're off to battle. The enthusiasm of the sailors, gunners, mooses, and officers spreads like wildfire. I'm no choir. My determination is not simply the fruit of wounded vanity. I'm just a fighter determined to face his oldest rival. There has never been a better time. We have an appointment with history. The time for action has finally come.
Here, we must destroy an old legend. At Trafalgar, Nelson did not surprise his adversaries with a novel tactic that would have stunned them. Months in advance, even before setting sail from Toulon, Villeneuve had described to his captains with extraordinary lucidity how Nelson would deliver his attack. The English would not be content to place their ship on a line parallel to ours, as was the old custom. They would form a column perpendicular to our line and cut it at several points, fragmenting our position, and to successively overwhelm the broken pieces. Villeneuve was so aware of his fleet's weaknesses that he could think of no other way of countering such an attack than to hold a line of wire as tight as possible. Any other maneuver seemed too complicated for an untrained fleet, some of whose units were appeared for the first time with improvised crews. Nelson's tactics had one serious drawback, however. The units at the head of the columns had to endure several minutes without being able to return the concentrated fire of several opponents. But Nelson knew that fire of the Franco-Spanish was slow and ill-adjusted. They were taking a calculated risk to impose a pell-mell combat at very close range, where the English carronades provided a valuable advantage. The British, in fact, were the only ones to possess these short, large-caliber cannons, capable of spitting streams of grape shot at point-blank range. The British were surprised to encounter such strong resistance. They were well aware of their superiority in shooting and maneuvering. They had 7 three-deckers to their opponent's 4. In these conditions, the Allies' advantage of 33 ships against 27 was of little consequence.
The breeze was very light, the swell heavy. Any maneuver takes an infinite amount of time. Our battle line has been difficult to set up. The wait seemed interminable. More than 3 hours pass before the distance separating our two fleets narrows, and the first shots can be fired. Unfortunately, our own shots are ill-adjusted. The cannonballs get lost. They cause very little damage. The reloading time for our guns is excessively long. Nevertheless, we manage to hit the victory. The English, stoic, do not retaliate. They wait for the best moment to attack us. My crew doesn't have the best weapons. Weapons, but a great faith in our emperor.
Soldats! Baron! Je vais jeter l'aigle sur le Victory! Nous irons le reprendre! Ou mourir!
At last, the victory is only a whisker away. The great hand-to-hand battle is about to begin.
Spyglass.
Nelson has succeeded in breaking our line of battle. The other English ships will rush into the breach with devastating strikes. Nelson prefers to attack a more vulnerable vessel, the Redoubtable, commanded by the valiant Commander Lucas. Lucas, a brave man, who has since taken the trouble to train his men to shoot at the top of the Hunes. He knows the English hate these high shots. They fear for their sails. Flames in them would condemn their ship to immobility.
N'oubliez pas l'abordage, commandant. T'inquiète pas, mon gars, je m'en occupe. Faites monter les compagnies d'abordage.
An incredible musketry duel ensued. Faithful to their leader, the Redoutable's courageous crew set all limits. For 15 long minutes, the English crew were ravaged by continuous and intense firing. Nelson, hit by a sniper's bullet, asked that his face be covered with a handkerchief. He didn't want to risk demoralizing his crew. Unfortunately for the Redoubtable, an English vessel arrives from astern and orders all its guns to fire at once. A single broadside in a single second, and 200 men ready to pounce on the Victory are mowed down from behind. I decide to hoist flag number 5. All ships are ordered to attack. But help doesn't come. I'm here, waiting for a death foretold that never comes. I'm here and I won't die. Even this ultimate deliverance is not granted to me. Nelson has succeeded. He has succeeded in obtaining the vast pelmel he wanted. Our line is broken. The Spanish and French ships are disunited. He can now attack with 2 ships against 1. The balance of power turns to our complete disadvantage. The disaster is total. My ship, the Bucentaur, is almost completely destroyed. The English heavy artillery has caused unbearable carnage, firing again and again, and harder into corpses already lying in wait, which we don't even have time to throw into the sea. The surgeons are overwhelmed. They amputate non-stop in less than 15 seconds because they have to move fast to withstand the pain. Resistance surprised our adversary. They thought the battle would be short-lived, but we held out for several hours. When we reached our ships, our enemies themselves were horrified by the carnage caused by their merciless strike force. At 5:15 p.m., the battle was over. The English lost 450 men and wounded 200. In our camp, 700 men lost their lives. 0 were wounded, and over 50 taken prisoner. Hundreds of survivors went deaf. Collective memory may remember the loss of the formidable. The Duguay-Trouin, the Mont Blanc, the Scipion, the Swiftshire, the Saint-Ildefonso, the Nepomuceno, the Santissima Trinidad, Argonauta, Berwick, Fougueux, Intrépide, Bahama, Monarca, the San Agustin, the Rayo, the Indomitable, the Neptuno, the Eagle, the Acis, the Redoubtable, the Bucentaur, and the Achilles explosion. I've been in France for 2 days now, but my heart is not happy. It remains somber and demands absolute solitude. My memory forbids me to forget and never lets me rest. My mind remains in Trafalgar. I still smell the acrid odor of gunpowder. I can still smell the blood spilt. I relive the endless bursts of gunfire. I remember the cannon salvos, and I remember my men giving up their lives for their country. Let public opinion know that I would have liked to have died with honor in combat, doing my duty. But will they understand that I have, at some point in my life, lost my way? Can I ever be forgiven? Stricken with anathema I wait. My dear and tender friend, I told you that I intended to wait here for the minister's orders. I received 2 letters, but they announced a delay in the emperor's decision concerning me, and banished any concern I might have had about it. So I'm being patient, but you can imagine my situation and how it must affect my morale. I don't want to see anyone until the emperor has pronounced on my all-too-famous case. I'm staying in my inn, but God help me to get out of it soon, because I can't resist it. Still, my good friend, if there were a short space between us, I could hope to kiss you. And if there are any possibilities, we'll join soon. As for me, I'll fly there. Give me news of the whole family. I'm costing them a lot of tears, and you too. Ah, my dear friend, You can be sure that I have shed many tears of my own. Adieu, my dear and tender friend, always your beloved for life. Villeneuve.
Villeneuve's body was discovered on April 22, 1806. The police report concluded that he had committed suicide. In the short term, the Battle of Trafalgar had been won. The English organized a grandiose funeral for Admiral Nelson. The Spanish buried Admiral Gravina in the Pantheon de Marin.